Drink beer, it's good for you. I'm empty-handed and I'm feeling blue, and I'm gonna drink till the day that I die.
Hello and welcome to this, the second of my beer brew tasting videos. I would urge you, if you haven't seen my first video already, to watch that one. This gives a lot of detail that I won't cover in this video about opinions on beer tasting and so forth. So again, we had a very enjoyable tasting evening. We actually tasted one beer that you don't see on the table here, my London Porter, but that's because it's in a Cornelius keg. And sadly, one of the beers you see on the table we just didn't find time for. That's the Irish Red Ale, but hey, that will come up next time. And just as was used in the first video, we used the Brewer's Friend party tasting sheets. You will find all of these scores within the YouTube description, and I have also added links to each of the brewing videos for your convenience. Okay, so without further ado, let's get on with the tasting results. Okay, so first up is what I call Double Delight, which is a Belgian double. This one was certainly very well received by the tasters, and I think the scores reflect that, with an impressive overall total of 92 out of 100. Yeah, I was rather pleased with that. I got the following tasting notes from the judges on this beer. Sweet with a nice texture, herbal, fruity, little bit of spice. I think it's fair to say that this beer has a fair amount of complexity also. So next up is my dry Irish stout. This was actually my very first Grainfather brew, and it's a style of stout that I really like to have in stock. Tasting notes received were as follows. The beer has a definite coffee taste, it's easy drinking, it's a non-complex, typical dry Irish stout. And now we move on to my Christmas beer. Please do excuse my British sense of humour, as is reflected in the title of this beer. I certainly don't believe, like some do, that an overspiced beer is a good beer. What I've noticed happens a fair amount in Norway is that people throw in a huge amount of spices into their Christmas brews and then wonder why they have to wait for at least a year or so before they're actually drinkable. So when I first put pen to paper and started writing this recipe, it was with that level of restraint that the recipe was made on. The spice notes that you'll find in this beer are, just as I say, spice notes. They are not overwhelming flavours that come straight to the forefront as soon as you take a sip. The judges of this beer were predominantly Norwegian, and as you can see by the scores here, it was an acceptable beer to them. On the tasting notes, I got the following comment. The first comment that came out was that this would be a beer that you could pair with many different types of food, and it would complement them well. It certainly proved to be an easy drinking beer, despite being a little bit higher than session strength. It has some nice, slightly sweet flavour notes, with some extra spice in the background just to keep it within the style. Okay, so here we have the Angry Hen, and this one was intended as an old speckled hen clone. Unfortunately, disaster struck this beer, and it's very sad because usually this turns out absolutely fantastic. This one got a wild yeast infection, which really caused all sorts of problems with overcarbonation and yeast flying everywhere as soon as you try and pour. The resulting beer is not what it should have been. It's still pretty decent though, considering. Luckily the beer judges here were able to really taste the good beer that was hiding underneath all of this issue. So I guess for this reason it's still got a pretty respectable 79.5 out of 100. I'm quite sure that had this wild yeast infection not taken place, then this would have scored at least 10 points higher. So here's the taste notes that I got from the judges on this particular one, wild yeast considered. So obviously we have wild yeast issue, we have good flavours underneath, we have what a shame, and sweet. Oh well, never mind. Okay, so now we have the Belgian double. Now this one was not brewed using a Grainfather. I did put it on my brewing channel though. This was actually brewed with a 10 litre Brewmaster Spidel. This one I'm rather fond of. It has some very unusual flavours and tastes to it, particularly for the style, but it's still very much two style. The judges during the tasting evening were rather fond of it also and gave it an 89 out of 100. Yeah, nice and respectable. From the tasting notes we have sweet with a pleasant alcohol sting, hot, spicy, fruity, and a lot of people mentioned that they felt that it was very much like a baby triple, and I would agree. Moving on now to my London Porter, and I have to say that out of all of these beers, this is definitely my favourite, and as you can see by the judges' score, definitely their favourite of these two. Scoring 94 out of 100, this one has been my highest scoring beer of both of the tastings. It's really nice in recent years to see this style coming back into commercial brewing. If you are someone who has never had a porter, then I would urge you to try one as soon as possible. Our judges had the following tasting notes: great lingering creamy head, biscuit, several sweet notes, and it's a complex beer that is true to style. Last but by no means least comes my chocolate coffee oatmeal brown ale. Yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful, this one, and it's fair to say that the beer itself is a mouthful also. The recipe for this one is very much the northern version of this style of England. Unlike the southern version of the style, yep, I know I'm a southerner, this one has an awful lot of different flavours and is a very hearty beer. I'm sure that many of you worldwide will probably be more familiar with the American brown ale, which is obviously an adaptation of the one from England. The original English styles had more of a focus on malt taste rather than hop taste. This beer certainly went down well with our judges, scoring 84 out of 100 points. The tasting notes were as follows: chocolate and coffee, raisins, biscuity, flavourful and pleasant. So this concludes the second of these tasting videos. There will be more in the future. I would like to extend a great thanks to my judges, and very much look forward to the next tasting session. So if you did like this video, then please do go ahead and like it on YouTube. This really helps me out and allows the videos to be seen by a wider audience on YouTube. I've got a lot of videos in the pipeline for the future, so if you're interested in seeing what I've got coming up, then please subscribe for future content. If you have any questions on anything that I've covered in this video or in others, or anything to do with brewing in general, then please do not hesitate to get in touch. I'm more than happy to help. Until then, happy brewing!